Heavy rains replenished reservoirs and helped Corpus Christi delay a water emergency. How city leaders will use the extra time on today's Texas Standard.
Texas Standard is a production of KUT Austin, KERA North Texas, Houston Public Media, and Texas Public Radio in San Antonio.
I'm Angela Cocherga in El Paso. Also ahead, concerns over data centers cross party lines in rural parts of the state. How Democrats are using the issue to win over some Republican voters. Plus, the latest Map the Meal Gap study shows Texas has the largest number of residents coping with food insecurity. We'll delve into the details. And you've heard of the SAT and ACT. What about the CLT? Why supporters want this test included as an option to college entrance exams. All that and more just ahead on today's Texas Standard. From Brownsville to Presidio to El Paso and all along the border, no matter where you are, it's Texas Standard Time on this 28th day of July 2026. I'm Angela Cocherga and so glad you can join us. It's another scorcher with much of the state under an excessive heat advisory. If the temperature doesn't soar into the triple digits, it will feel like it because of the humidity in some places. Here in West Texas, it's dry but very hot. In El Paso, the low temperature this morning was 80 degrees, and the high will reach 104. July also brought heavy rains for the second year in a row. As South Central Texas recovers from recent flooding, all that rain has helped replenish the water sources in parts of the state that are struggling. As we reported here on the Standard, nowhere has the situation seemed more dire than Corpus Christi. That city faced a water emergency with a looming deadline. The date has shifted some, and this week city leaders announced their projected water emergency is now delayed until the fall of 2028. While residents breathe a collective sigh of relief, there's hope and perhaps a lot of doubt city leaders will use the extra time to come up with the long-term solutions to the looming water shortage. So what does this reprieve mean? For the latest, we're joined by Dylan Badur, who has reported extensively on Corpus Christi's water issues for Inside Climate News. Dylan, welcome back to the Texas Standard.
Thanks for having me.
Well, until these latest storms, how close was Corpus Christi from declaring day zero, the point when water demand is projected to be 6 months from exceeding supply?
Well, the worst this situation got was in April when they said it could be coming within a month. But by, early July, rains had come, the weather had changed, and they were already pushing this emergency off until late next year. About a month ago, reservoirs were still at 15% capacity, still pretty dangerously low levels. Today, they've risen up to 26% capacity, which is higher than they've been since July of 2024.
So elaborate a little more about the floodwaters and what it's meant for the water sources in and around Corpus.
Sure. So we're talking about the Nueces River Basin here, which stretches all the way up to the hill country. So a few weeks ago when we had those humongous record-breaking rains in the hill country, they flowed down the Nueces River past Uvalde, and this all goes into the reservoirs that supply Corpus Christi, which is Choke Canyon and Lake Corpus Christi. These reservoirs have been dangerously low for a long time. They dropped below 30% in the beginning of 2024, and they're still below 30%. But Corpus Christi city leaders do say they could rise above 30% for the first time in 2 years as those waters keep flowing down the river, because even though the rains were a few weeks ago, those floods are still making their way into Corpus Christi reservoirs. So the situation might even continue to improve for folks down there.
Well, this new delayed emergency projection from city leaders is now set for fall of 2028, as we mentioned. Have they indicated how they will find solutions? And as you've reported, there's a lot of criticism about how they've managed the water resources up to now.
That is true. There's a lot of criticism, and there's really no clarity on a solution yet. As the situation became an emergency earlier this year, they really, tossed a lot of balls up into the air when it comes to water supply projects. They're pursuing, 6 or 7 different projects, many of which have run into pretty big roadblocks and troubles. Everyone knows about the desalination plant, of course. So they know they still have to get one of these online. Now they're saying they have at least 2 years. Very likely we'll have more than that if you look at the drought cycles here. But at some point, they're going to have to get one of these projects online. They know that.
Well, have they made any progress on the current water projects? And just kind of refresh people's memories about what's going on with that desalination plant.
Really, they have made some progress, yes. What's going on with the desalination plant is not a whole lot. It's been discussed for a long time. It was canceled late last year, and they've tried to revive it this year, but not with a lot of success. So it's not totally dead, and it still doesn't have a clear path forward. Otherwise, the city sunk hundreds of millions of dollars into a groundwater project called the Evangeline Project. And after all those expenditures, that project is effectively stalled right now, pending settlement negotiations with a neighbor. So there's still a lot of problems they got to work through.
Yeah, well, is there anything hopeful on the horizon? You said some of them are making progress, or not really?
Well, they have brought, what they call their Nueces River well fields online. That produce a relatively small amount of water, and that's really an emergency project that was, put into effect this year. It's not intended to be a permanent long-term water supply. So really, if we're looking for good news, mostly in the weather so far, it does seem to be that this cycle of drought has ended. Perhaps that this April, when we got to the worst case and, the lowest levels of record on this lake, that maybe we bottomed out until next drought cycle. So we'll keep watching for that.
Well, what are you keeping an eye on going forward? Anything you're looking at?
Well, it's the desalination wars down on the Gulf Coast, I would say. There are several competing proposals for desalination plants. There are big international companies involved in here. Many, many millions of dollars have already been spent on this initiative going back at least to 2014. So it's not something they're just going to drop, and they continue to have ambitions to be, put this first seawater desalination plant in Texas. We've been talking about that for a long time, but that's still what they're aiming at. And we'll see if they can make it happen.
We've been speaking with Dylan Badur, and we'll link to his reporting for Inside Climate News at texasstandard.org. Dylan, thank you so much for the update.
My pleasure.
After Congress allowed the Affordable Care Act tax credits to lapse, healthcare premiums spiked for millions of self-employed Americans and part-time workers. Farmers and ranchers were among the groups hit hardest, and they're already dealing with a tough agricultural economy. Harvest Public Media's Macy Byers tells us how healthcare costs are influencing decisions on the farm.
Ben Steffen is driving past fields of corn and soybeans on his farm in southeastern Nebraska.
The crop's growing fast and the weeds are growing faster.
Yeah. We pull up to a barn that's full of hay. It used to hold dairy cattle, but Steffen sold them a few years ago. Now he's focused on crops, but costs have been high this year as the war with Iran pushed up fertilizer and diesel prices.
This is the most expensive crop we've ever put in the ground. And it's kind of breathtaking when you do this year after year and you keep seeing those numbers go up.
On top of those high input costs for farming, Steffen and his wife, Paula Sue, are also dealing with higher costs for health care. They used to be part of a group health plan when they had employees handling the dairy operation. Since then, they've switched to an Affordable Care Act plan, or Obamacare.
Last year we paid around $13,000 net after we got our premium credit back.
That was for the two of us. That was our out-of-pocket expense.
Yeah. And this year, we're on track to pay $32,000 a year.
$32,000. That's about $2,700 a month, more than double what they were paying the year before. And that's one of the cheapest options. ACA plans are a common choice for people who can't access health care through a traditional employer, like farmers and ranchers. Congress allowed tax credits to expire this year that covered some of the health plan's costs. Now, premiums have doubled or even tripled for many users.
It's scary because it's cutting into their bottom line. They didn't necessarily budget for this. They didn't plan for this.
That's Nick Lewandowski, who leads the Kansas Farmers Union.
And so therefore they've got to make difficult decisions around that. I have heard of people who've just flat out dropped their insurance.
Lewandowski, who also farms, says his own ACA premiums nearly tripled this year. Some lower-cost health options for farmers are offered through farm bureaus and unions, but the plans are limited. Many farm families have a spouse work off the farm to get health insurance. Dina Vanderzalm works with the Missouri Rural Crisis Center. She says the organization advocated for the Affordable Care Act because it kept family members on the farm and helped farmers address medical issues earlier.
Having access to insurance is super duper important for the farming community because that's protecting them from letting massive medical debt sink the farm, right? It's a layer of protection.
The Missouri Rural Crisis Center and other groups are calling on Congress to bring back the ACA tax credits. In the meantime, Vanderzalm says farmers are dealing with razor-thin margins.
It is a constant juggle. We're still hearing from people of, we're making choices on bills, we're paying minimums on things, we're setting up payment plans with doctors' offices, not just hospitals.
She says farmers are used to unpredictable factors, like weather or how their harvest will turn out. But now it's a given that their health plan will be expensive. Even though the business is tough now, Ben and Paula Sue Steffen say they still wouldn't choose any other profession.
The freedom to be self-employed is undervalued and underappreciated. Our corn's growing 3 or 4 inches every day, it seems like, and you can just see the landscape changing, and it's a hopeful season. It's a hopeful business, really.
And the 64-year-olds hope this will be their last year with high health costs as they plan to enroll in Medicare next year. For Harvest Public Media, I'm Macy Byers.
This story is part of Tough Times, a Harvest Public Media series looking at the economic stress that many American farmers are facing this year. Harvest Public Media is a collaboration of public media newsrooms in the Midwest, Great Plains, and the Texas Standard. This Saturday marks 60 years since a gunman took aim at the University of Texas at Austin campus from atop the UT Tower. Back then, no one had any reference point for such a mass shooting. Texas Standard collected an oral history of dozens of people who were there during the shooting for a documentary marking 50 years. A decade later, as fewer of those people are here to share the memories, we revisit the day back in 1966 with a special edition of the Texas Standard this Friday. Out of the Blue is an hour-long documentary that includes the voices of shooting survivors, the Austin police officers who responded to the emergency, a journalist who covered the breaking news, and many others who will never forget what happened that hot summer day in Austin.
Support for Texas Standard comes from HEB and the My HEB app, which is available for download, and shopping fresh departments like seafood, produce, bakery, and deli, and scheduling curbside pickup or home delivery. More at heb.com.
This is the Texas Standard. I'm Laura Rice. Uvalde County is beginning the long process of documenting damage and seeking reimbursement after this month's flooding. Texas Public Radio's Corey Cook reports.
County commissioners approved creating a temporary flood assessment coordinator position to document damage to roads and low water crossings and help secure reimbursement from the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Residents also urged officials to move faster on recovery efforts. Lori McDonald has lived in the Deer Valley subdivision of Uvalde for 36 years and says neighbors had to restore access themselves.
Do you know that we were in there for over a week and not one person came to help fix the road? You know who did? The Uvalde, Deer Valley residents came together with their tractors, their skid steers, and we fixed the roads to get in and out.
A county debris removal plan remains on hold while officials await additional guidance from FEMA and the Texas Division of Emergency Management. I'm Corey Cook in San Antonio.
And you're listening to the Texas Standard. Several statewide Democratic candidates wrapped up a Plains and Panhandle campaign tour last week. They stopped in communities like Amarillo, Plainview, and Abilene, which have long been considered Republican strongholds. They began their tour in Lubbock, with appearances at a round table, a rally, and a local protest. A recurring topic at these separate events: data centers, and a growing call for the state to take action over their large-scale expansion with a special session of the legislature. KTTZ's Brad Burt reports that concerns over these facilities have crossed party lines for voters in rural Texas, and Democrats are pushing to take advantage.
Riley Rodriguez is the Democratic candidate running for the Texas Senate seat in District 28, which covers parts of the Panhandle down to south of San Angelo and the Rolling Plains. At a rally in Lubbock, Rodriguez said large-scale data centers are what got him started on this campaign. Facilities like Stargate, a $500 billion project to facilitate data for future AI data models, brought 6,000 temporary construction workers and sent rents skyrocketing in Rodriguez's hometown of Abilene.
When Stargate came into Abilene, on day one, we had rent hikes. That ain't nothing but greed. That's not West Texas, and that's not rural Texas, and that's not the Texas that I grew up in. And when I reached out to our representatives, the answer was that's progress. Sometimes we're going to have some growing pains.
Earlier in July, Rodriguez was one of more than 500 West Texans who attended a forum hosted by the city of Lubbock to gather public input on large-scale data centers. The majority spoke against them, with some calling for a moratorium or outright ban of the facilities. Rodriguez's opponent, incumbent Republican Senator Charles Perry, wrote in an op-ed with the Lubbock Avalanche Journal that he believes these data center projects could present an opportunity for shrinking rural communities to build new revenue and draw jobs back, but he added that Texans deserve transparency from developers in the process. Meanwhile, citizens in Childress, a town of about 5,700 people within District 28, came out to protest in mid-July when rents shot up at a local apartment complex, forcing longtime citizens to vacate. Community advocates linked the situation to nearby data center development.
When single mothers are getting displaced and put into hotel rooms, the day that their rent goes up, and they're just trying to get by, that's not progress.
Rodriguez was joined at the rally by other West Texas Democrats and November midterm candidates from across the state, including Ag Commissioner candidate Clayton Tucker, Lieutenant Governor candidate Representative Vicki Goodwin, and Representative Gina Hinojosa, who's competing against Greg Abbott for Texas governor. For some West Texans in a region where Republicans have held the majority for nearly 30 years, the recent level of campaign attention from statewide Democratic candidates is unfamiliar. This March saw record-breaking midterm primary voter turnout across the state, with Democrats in their primary outpacing Republicans for the first time since the presidential year in 2020, and rural voters in Texas casting the highest percentage of all votes. Democrat Kyle Rabel is running against Republican Tom Self for Texas District 19 seat in the U.S. House of Representatives. He remarked on the number of new faces at the rally, both on and off the stage, as a sign of confidence.
We took the entire statewide slate almost, and they came out to Lubbock, Texas. That proves two things, that we are together in this fight, but also that rural Texas is on the radar for us.
Earlier that day, Representative Hinojosa sat down at a round table with Lubbock community members to talk about data centers.
I know that y'all are leaders in this community and you have big fights happening, and I hear you're winning.
In January, developers requested zoning changes over 936 acres of land in northeast Lubbock to build a large-scale data center. Members of the North and East Lubbock Coalition and Lubbock's chapter of the NAACP came to the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting to advocate against the development. The commission voted against the project, and developers eventually withdrew the proposal. Hinojosa's roundtable included leaders from the group Save Lubbock, which is currently collecting signatures to put an 18-month moratorium on data center development before the city council. The large-scale data processing campuses can take up thousands of acres, with the potential for significant energy and water needs scaling up as the campuses grow, which has left farmers and ranchers across the country feeling pressure to compete with tech companies like Google and Meta. Hallie Bertrand is an organizer with Save Lubbock whose fiancé works as a rancher in West Texas.
Agriculture is, in most of the rural areas and a lot of Lubbock as well, our number one industry. And so if that is being decimated by these out-of-state data centers, there's nothing left for us here.
More than 10 years ago, state lawmakers approved a tax break to draw in new development with facilities like large-scale data centers. Now, Governor Abbott, who has called Texas a, quote, centerpiece for AI data centers, is saying they should be banned in rural areas. Hinojosa says that allowing decisions to be made on the local level by electing officials who know their communities means more accountability than when control is held at the state level, but that may not be enough.
People are fighting a fight that is reasonable. People just want power over their communities. They want to say over what's happening. They want basic information about what data centers are doing to our communities and our resources.
Critics on both sides of the political aisle are calling for faster action. After the rally, Democratic candidates came back together, this time joining with outgoing Republican Ag Commissioner Sid Miller. Miller, who lost the GOP nomination to return as Ag Commissioner in this year's primary, has been an outspoken opponent of data center expansion. Miller told reporters that waiting for the state's response through the regular session would leave time for data center developers to solidify legal responses of their own.
They start in January, they finish in June, and the new laws won't take effect until September 2027. That's over a year away. We don't have 14 months. We need to deal with this now.
Goodwin is running for Texas lieutenant governor seat against incumbent Republican Dan Patrick, but she also currently represents Texans in the Austin area in the Texas House. She said while it probably wouldn't help her campaign schedule between now and November, she's joining the call on Abbott for a special session.
We need transparency from these companies to understand how much water and how much electricity they're going to be using. We need to set in place some regulation to make sure that they aren't pushing the cost of the new infrastructure to bring that water and energy onto us in our homes.
While localized community efforts have seen steps forward, such as the data center ban in San Marcos, smaller rural communities rely more on counties, which do not have the same regulatory control as city offices. Commissioners in other counties have tried to enact moratoriums and been met with lawsuits from developers and warnings from state lawmakers. Without wider authority, West Texans worry county-based developments will remain largely unchecked. I'm Brad Burt in Lubbock.
Support for Texas Standard comes from UT San Antonio, offering degree programs and research focused on workforce development, student success, and health innovation across Texas. The University of Ambition. ambition.utsa.edu.
In the Texas newsroom, I'm Shelby Rose. The number of data centers getting tax breaks for setting up shop in Texas has grown from 10 in 2020 to more than 138 now. That's prompted a review by state senators who say the incentives to get data centers in Texas have gotten out of hand. Critics rallied with outgoing Texas Agriculture Commissioner Sid Miller outside the state capitol.
I have called on the governor. People all across our state is called on the governor to call a special session to deal with these data centers finally.
And the mood on data centers has changed over the past year, with Governor Abbott now saying he supports stricter regulations. Plus, a new rule from the Department of Homeland Security will make it easier for the Trump administration to deport asylum seekers. Houston Public Media's Andrew Schneider reports the rule is slated to take effect today.
The interim final rule will let asylum officers refer asylum applicants to immigration court without first interviewing them.
The rule is being published now, but in practice, immigration has been doing this for about 10 months now.
Houston immigration attorney Ali Zachariah says the rule provides the Trump administration with legal cover for actions it was already taking.
There might have been one or two lawsuits or motions filed because the asylum officer didn't have the authority to transfer the files without an interview directly to immigration court, but now they do.
Zachariah says that the people most likely to be affected by the rule change are those who are set to lose temporary protected status due to an end-of-term U.S. Supreme Court ruling. I'm Andrew Schneider in Houston.
And one of the witnesses in the van when ICE agents shot and killed a man earlier this month in Houston has been ordered to be released by a judge. A spokesman for the Department of Homeland Security says agents opened fire after the driver weaponized his vehicle, but the passengers dispute that claim. And the Pentagon is no longer counting a 19-year-old North Texas soldier's death as connected with the war against Iran. KERA's Dylan Duke reports her death is now counted under a new category created Sunday.
Isabel Gonzalez of Carrollton was among 3 soldiers killed this month on a U.S. military base in Jordan from an Iranian missile and drone attack. Those deaths are counted in the Defense Casualty Analysis System. They were originally counted under the death toll for the war with Iran. But on Sunday, the deaths were counted under a new, separate category called Overseas Operations. The number of wounded soldiers has also fluctuated in recent weeks. Pentagon officials have referred to prior issues with the casualty reports as temporary data disruptions. I'm Dylan Duke in Dallas.
And Texas Republican Lance Gooden of Terrell is the subject of a House ethics probe. The panel hasn't revealed what it is investigating, but Gooden said it was overspending and dismissed it as baseless. I'm Shelby Rose in the Texas newsroom.
Support for these Texas headlines comes from Texas Casa. For a child in foster care, small moments today can have a big impact tomorrow. More on how lending time and support can make a difference at becomeacasa.org.
33 minutes past the hour, Texas Standard Time. I'm Angela Kocherga. 11 years ago, high school teacher Jeremy Tate set out to create a standardized test for students centered on ethics, virtue, and tradition. The classic learning test he created has been championed by conservatives as an alternative to the ACT and SAT exams. Those are the 2 dominant tests used in college admissions. Now the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board is weighing whether to add this test as an approved option for students who want to gain entry into some of the most prestigious public universities. Here to tell us more is Lily Kepner. She covers higher education for the Austin American-Statesman. Lily, welcome back.
Thank you.
So give us some examples of what's on this exam and how is it different from the ACT or SAT?
So the CLT really is pitching itself as a test grounded in Western civilization, drawing from the Bible and from ancient texts as, the more classical education you think of, and that conservatives are championing with the creation of more civic-centered schools, including at the University of Austin and elsewhere. So they're saying that, the ACT and the SAT, might draw from more modern events, but this is really grounded in texts like Shakespeare and stuff like that, might not force students to think about current events, but is really grounded in that traditional education that conservatives are really gung-ho about.
So at this moment, is the CLT accepted anywhere in Texas? And what about in other states?
Yes, it is accepted in Texas. It's accepted at 22 private institutions and 1 public university, West Texas A&M. I reached out to West Texas A&M to ask them about why they accepted this test, and they said that they view it as a way to better include homeschool students and other non-traditional students who might have different kinds of education. But what's interesting about that is a test has to be pretty rigorous to allow students to, gain entry into these institutions. And so a law passed last session that allowed the coordinating board to commission an independent study looking into the validity of this test and the SAT and the ACT. And the SAT and the ACT surpassed the CLT on almost every measure, notably on predictive validity, which basically means, it's the test's ability to predict college success, which is what you want these tests to do. And when I asked the CLT about this finding, they said, they were only using Texas data, and if they had used a more inclusive sample size, it would have had higher marks. But it's interesting because the CLT really wants to be an alternative, but the test had mixed results on whether it sufficiently matched the ACT and SAT standards.
Well, you do mention in your story that Texas A&M did its own study on the CLT. What did they find?
They found that it met the bar to be a college admissions test. However, it did not meet their standards for predictive validity. And that was of concern to researchers because they said that, the ACT and SAT have really proven themselves as being true indicators of college success, and the CLT has not reached that.
Well, what kind of process would be needed for the state to accept this as an option for college admission, and what steps are involved?
Well, what's interesting is that it's up to universities to decide to accept this test or not. So when we've reached out to universities, some of them said, we're not thinking about this test. We feel confident with the ACT and SAT. While some others, ears perked up at the news that the coordinating board was considering adding this to state statute. What the coordinating board has authority over is a small subset of students who want to qualify for automatic admission, but might not have all the marks. Maybe they're a homeschooled student, or maybe they're at they're at a high school that didn't offer the required classes. And in this case, if they add the CLT to state statute, that would allow those students to take that test and say, hey, I qualify for automatic admission. But universities and the CLT are kind of looking at this as, an endorsement of the CLT as a valid option. And that's a decision that carries a lot of weight with these universities.
So would this mean all public schools have to accept this test, or would it be up to the school to decide?
It would be up to the schools to decide, unless the legislature passed something that said that they had to do it next session.
We've been speaking to Lily Kepner, who reports on higher education for the Austin American-Statesman. Lily, thank you so much.
Of course.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Mutual Insurance Company, a Texas-based workers' compensation provider committed to providing care and support for injured employees. More at texasmutual.com/TexansDeliver.
I'm Kenan, and you're listening to the Texas Standard. The earliest memory of music that had an impact on me? I think it would probably have to be like church or like family, because like my grandmother, my dad, and my mom can sing. So I would have to say that. Seeing them sing around the house, seeing my dad, because he's a preacher, so seeing him sing in the pulpit. But those are probably my earliest memories and probably the most significant. And then my grandmother singing all the time, like singing happy birthday to me, singing to me while I'm in the tub, singing to me while I was in the womb, like just always singing. I played the trombone. I started with the drums, but they didn't have any more spots, so they just put me on the trombone. But yeah, I've done band since I was in 6th grade. My main thing when I started doing music is to make sure anything I did sounded smooth and that I can make anybody sound good. That's the whole reason I wanted to engineer and produce. I would think of the producer as the painter and the engineer as the brush. I was already doing country music. I just would never release it, and I would just never do anything with it. Like, I was really making the country songs to send to other people. There's different styles of country, because I like to think of my music as Southern music, no matter if it's R&B or country. I am from the South. My goal was to blend both genres in my own way. I would do like a regular guitar, something that reminisced country, but make the drums like R&B or whatever the case was. But like all last year or early this year, it kind of just came out as like regular country. When I'm singing or songwriting, I'm talking about stuff like eating shrimp and grits on a Saturday morning, or the things I used to do before we get up for church in the morning and stuff like that. If you're gonna switch genres, you have to be confident in that genre. You cannot go halfway. Like, if you're gonna do it, just do it. Country is deeper than the accent. Being an artist and engineer has helped me build community by putting me in spaces that I wouldn't normally put myself in, and also like just surrounding myself around different energies. I'm Kenan, and you're listening to the Texas Standard.
I've been burning up, trying to survive. Fill it up now, fill it up and watch it burn.
It's the Texas Standard. I'm Angela Kocherga. If you visited a public park in Irving recently, you may have noticed something different about the landscaping crew on site. Instead of heavy machinery, these workers brought an appetite. KERA's Andy Lusk has more.
It's another crazy summer day in Irving. The sun is shining, the temperature is soaring, and there's something interesting afoot, or maybe a hoof, at River Hills Park. What you're hearing is a herd of goats chowing down on overgrown plants like ragweed and privet. Some of the items on the menu are invasive species that can cause real problems for native flora and fauna. As part of a new green initiative, livestock are taking over some landscaping duties on Irving public lands. Over 400 goats are roaming select areas throughout the city. Hundreds more are on the way. They'll rotate locations, lending a hand to city workers clearing brush over the next few months.
That's where it really started from. How can we clean this area up without, introducing liability to our staff, because they need to be doing other things.
That's Irving Parks Services Manager Nathan Fredoloso. He says the goats are helping clear some areas city staff haven't been able to get to before.
We had to be innovative, which is ironic because we're resulting back to animals to clean without some big machine.
These animal workers mean business. They're all female Spanish goats about a year old. They came in from Oklahoma for the project, which kicked off in the spring. They mill about inside an electrified fence, which staff say is more for keeping coyotes, dogs, and people out than for keeping goats in. Human workers move the perimeter throughout the target area to give the goats more places to graze. The goats come in all sorts of colors and patterns, and they're especially glossy under the Texas sun. They seem to eat well and are healthy. After all, they have plenty of brush to snack on. Rex Rutledge is the general manager and co-owner of Restoration Grazing, the private company contracted by the city for this project. Rutledge says the goats' main objective is to take the crust off of everything and defoliate the plants and young trees. That makes it easier for parks employees to do their jobs.
They trample a lot of stuff down to the ground, and they open it up so that Nathan's crew with the Parks Department can come in and take the next steps in further giving access to these brushy parklands and just making it more livable for the residents here.
Rutledge points out that the goats eating down invasive species offer native plants a better chance to flourish. But there's another surprise benefit in the mix.
All the fertilizer that comes out the back end of the goat is just adding to the organic matter in the soil. So there's a whole nother sector of benefits ecologically that the goats add to the project.
The city is slated to bring the goats back for at least 4 more years, contracting with Rutledge's Wichita, Kansas-based company. Rutledge says what his company does is an ancient practice with modern management. And there's a reason that practice still matters.
Whether it's just bringing their kids out to see the goats and getting that joyful afternoon, or you don't have a mower that can take this brush down, so you need the goats literally to do it for you. It's everyone needs the goats. They just might not know it yet.
Fred Aloso says other cities in the Metroplex, like Arlington and Fort Worth, have brought goats in for landscaping work before. And so far, the public response in Irving has been positive.
People love goats. They love watching them. I'm sure Rex has fielded a lot of calls and questions. Can I touch them? Can I go in there? We direct people to our petting farm for more pettable goats, but these are workers.
Pettable goats are at the Animal Connection experience at Fritz Park. But the worker goats will continue doing their jobs throughout the summer. I'm Andy Lusk in Irving.
A late-night comedian is challenging Buc-ee's to a legal battle. Last week, Tonight host John Oliver has criticized the gas station chain for its history of suing to protect its branding and trademark. Over the years, Buc-ee's has filed numerous lawsuits against other convenience stores with similar rodent logos, but also businesses with different mascots, including an alligator and a moose. Oliver said Buc-ee's usually wins the lawsuits because other companies don't have the means to fight back. But his show wants to do just that. Last week, Tonight has now launched its own line of merchandise with the squirrel mascot and bold letters that say, "Buck off." That's a B. Oliver directly challenged Buc-ee's to sue him, but pointed out that the money raised from the sales of T-shirts and water bottles goes to Hunger-Free America.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Half Price Books, a Texas-bred new and used bookstore, proudly supporting public media and sustainability by keeping books, music, and other media in circulation. Store locations and more information at hpb.com.
Hey, what's cooking? Make sure to join us as we check in with Texas's top taco journalists to hear about the latest innovation stories and the people behind many a Texan's favorite go-to. It's Mondo Rayo with the Tacos of Texas. Next Thursday on the Texas Standard.
Support for Tacos of Texas comes from HEB.
You've got it tuned to the Texas Standard. I'm Laura Rice. Nearly 1 in 5 Texans experiences food insecurity, and that rate is continuing to rise. That's according to a new study by Feeding America, a national network of food banks. The study examines hunger at a county-by-county level. Celia Cole is CEO of Feeding Texas, the state's food bank network. Celia, welcome back to the Texas Standard.
Thank you for having me.
The latest Map the Meal Gap study, which is published each year, found Texas has the largest number of residents experiencing food insecurity, and not just the raw number, but the rate is increasing. Am I getting that right? And how many people are we talking about here?
Yeah, you've got it right. So nearly 1 in 5 Texans, and that's over 6 million people in our state, are now food insecure. And so that is the largest food insecure population anywhere in the country. And it has increased. It's up from 1 in 6 Texans last year. So the trend is definitely moving in the wrong direction. And it touches, every part of the state and every demographic. It's food insecurity is not confined to an area or type of person. So we have a very high rate of kids facing food insecurity. 1 in 4 Texas kids don't have reliable access to food. That's up from 1 in 5 last year. And then 1 in 7 Texas seniors are food insecure, also rising. So those are vulnerable populations for whom, food insecurity can really have lasting consequences.
Let's talk about that term, food insecurity. How do hunger experts define it?
Yeah, it's really just not being able to afford food on a reliable basis, so like not having consistent access to the food you need to survive and thrive. And it's typically connected to food resources, not having enough income or other resources to consistently afford food. And then I think in more rural areas of the state, and even in urban areas where, there aren't affordable places to get nutritious food. People may be relying on convenience stores or Dollar Generals. That is not in itself a food insecurity, but it can be a contributor too. Is just simply not having the money or the ability to get somewhere to buy healthy food.
Well, you mentioned this really is affecting Texans of all demographics, but children and seniors affected. And also I understand Black Texans are experiencing higher rates of food insecurity. Can you talk about those findings?
Yeah, it definitely disproportionately affects communities of color. And again, I think that is related to just income disparities between people of communities of color and white communities, because it is so much driven by income and the resources that families have to afford food. And we saw that really particularly pronounced during the pandemic. I think those racial disparities. And so, we're really focused as food banks on figuring out where are the areas of greatest need and how do we fill in the gaps when people don't qualify for programs like SNAP.
Well, SNAP has been in the headlines recently for not meeting enough needs. And I understand this data from this study is even older than that. It dates back from 2024. I guess, what are your observations from your work about how things have continued to change for Texans facing food insecurity?
Yeah, it wasn't surprising to see the numbers from 2024. And I think if we had real-time data today, the numbers might be even higher because we are seeing more people show up in our lines, people having deeper needing more food when they do show up or showing up more frequently. And I think that's directly related to high food prices and high fuel prices. That's just really kind of stretching families' budgets to the limit. And then at the same time, what you've seen in the past year is a loss of over 500,000 Texans on SNAP, which is the exact opposite of what you would normally see at a time when food insecurity is so high and food prices are so high. And what we're seeing in our lines, people showing up 2 hours before a food distribution to line up for food. So none of that picture and the data aren't consistent with what's happening with SNAP enrollment. That's directly tied to changes that were made in H.R. 1, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act from last year that reduced eligibility for certain populations and then put in place stricter work requirements for other populations, including older adults and more families with children. And when you look at you sort of break down the decline demographically, it is those populations where we're seeing steeper decline. So our concern is people are not leaving the program because they found work or they're no longer food insecure, but they are just struggling to stay connected to food assistance when they still need it.
So what are you seeing and hearing at your food banks all across Texas?
People are confused about the new requirements, struggling to figure out how to meet them, concerned they may not be eligible when they are. And then I do think there's also, kind of that chill factor that the immigrant community is facing, where even if a family member is eligible for SNAP, there's concern that it'll affect their ability to become a green card holder or could get them deported. So I think we're definitely seeing fewer what we call sort of mixed status families, where there may be citizens and there may be legal immigrants, there may be someone undocumented, kind of just afraid to apply for programs like SNAP or enroll in school meal programs. And then maybe also afraid to show up for charitable food assistance because they're worried about ICE enforcement. So I think it's just a lot of uncertainty and fear, concern. Am I going to be able to put food on the table? Am I going to be able to keep SNAP benefits? And then, of course, the same kind of high food and fuel prices that are making it harder for Texans to make ends meet are also straining food bank resources. It's costing us more money to get food in and out the door. And, federal resources for food have gone down as well. So I think everyone's feeling the strain right now.
As we gear up for another Texas legislative session, what do you need from lawmakers?
Well, the big change that the One Big Beautiful Bill Act made to SNAP is for 60 plus years, the benefits have been 100% federally funded. And that's critical to make sure the program can grow when need increases. And what H.R. 1 did was say to states, if you don't hit new payment accuracy targets, then you're going to have to pick up a share of those benefits. And so if you look at Texas' error rate right now, which is what the cost share is tied to, it's well above the new threshold. It's at a little over 9%, and states need to get to 6% this fiscal year. That means we will be on the hook for over $700 million a year starting in fiscal 2028. And so the next legislature would have to budget for that, and this is a program they've never had to pay for before. So we're very concerned about the strain that could put on state budget when there are lots of other needs out there. And so what we're really focusing on right now between now and the legislative session is pushing Congress to delay that cost share requirement, to sort of provide an extension for 2 more years to give to Texas and other states time to improve their payment accuracy so that families don't get cut off from food assistance. And this is an extension that already was granted in H.R. 1 to states with really high error rates. So all we're pushing for is a level playing field, reasonable time frames for states to get to that new target so that we're not, inadvertently punishing eligible families.
Celia Cole is CEO of Feeding Texas. We'll share more on this new study on food insecurity at texasstandard.org. Celia, thanks again for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're out of time for today's program, but you can keep up with the news 24/7 at texasstandard.org. Our producers and reporters include Sarah Esch, Shelley Brisbane, Michael Marks, and Sean Saldana. Raul Alonso is our assistant digital editor. Leah Scarpelli is our director, and Jake Perlman is our technical director. Our summer interns are Portia Goins and Charlie Sharp. Managing producer is Laura Rice, and our executive producer is Rhonda Fanning. From all of us at The Standard, thank you for listening. I'm Angela Cocherga, wishing you the very best from El Paso.
Philanthropic support for Texas Standard comes from Casey and Scott O'Hare, the Winkler Family Foundation, Lynn Dobson and Greg Wooldridge, Adrian Killam, and the George Huntington family.